Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is YPO Presents. I'm Ekaterina Walter, Marketing Director at YPO, and it is my distinct privilege to present to you the extraordinary YPO member and our today's guest, Rana el Kaliouby. Welcome, Rana.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to meet you all.
Absolutely excited about today's conversation. It's going to be fantastic. So a little bit about Rana, right? Rana is a pioneer in emotional AI. And yes, we'll talk about what that is. So Dr. Rana el Kaliouby is a co-founder and CEO of Affectiva and author of the book, Girl Decoded, a scientist's quest to reclaim our humanity by bringing emotional intelligence to technology. A passionate advocate for humanizing technology, ethics in AI, and diversity, Rana has been recognized on Fortune's 40 Under 40 list and is one of the Forbes top 50 women in tech. Rana is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and former co-host of a PBS NOVA series on AI. She holds a Ph.D. from the University of Cambridge and a Post Doctorate from MIT. A very impressive list of accomplishments. I am very much looking towards today's conversation. And if you're watching us live, post your questions in the comment section below, and Rana will answer them as time permits. I will make sure that we'll get some of those questions answered. So Rana, let's start at the beginning. As the pioneer in artificial intelligence, or let me say artificial emotional intelligence, can you tell us what emotional AI is and why did you focus your efforts on it? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, the thesis is actually very simple, and it will resonate, I think, with this audience. So if you think about human intelligence, it's not just about our cognitive intelligence or our IQ. We all know that your EQ or your emotional intelligence is just as important. There's been gobs and gobs of research that basically demonstrate that people who have higher EQ tend to do better in life. They're more likable, they're more persuasive, they're more effective in what they do, both in their personal and their professional lives. So as AI becomes more mainstream and is kind of weaved in every aspect of our lives, I believe the same is true for AI and technology. AI needs to have emotional intelligence. It needs to have empathy. It needs to engage with people just the way we engage with one another. And so that's really my mission, to humanize technology before it dehumanizes us.
Well, so how many fields or industries do you think are or maybe will be impacted by emotional AI? And how is the technology being applied in those fields? I mean, what's the status currently on that?
Yeah, again, the goal, and I really believe this is going to be true in the next, call it 3 to 5 years, it'll become like emotion AI will become the de facto human machine interface. So we're already seeing that we are interfacing with technology through conversation, think Amazon Alexa and Siri. And very soon this will generalize to perception. So just machines that understand, human emotions, human activities, human behaviors. And so what the missing element is empathy, right? Is this idea of emotional intelligence. So I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see all our devices interact with us just the way we interact with one another. Now, the industries that are going to be transformed because of that include everything from how brands emotionally engage with their viewers and their audiences, to automotive, how we're going to have safer and more enjoyable transportation experiences. Mental health is an area that I'm very, very passionate about. And I really think this kind of technology can transform how we measure and how we diagnose mental health, and even kind of treat mental health as well. So there's a lot of applications across many, many industries.
So there's people who going to say or are saying that, well, some of this is far out there, some of it is happening, but really to reach the goal in the way you're describing it, it's far out there. Give us some examples. I mean, what are the companies doing right now that really showcases the power of emotion AI?
Yeah, so absolutely, and I always find that really interesting when I talk about my company Affectiva. We spun out of MIT 10 years ago, right? We were very early to the market, and now the market is materializing. But this technology is already out there. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In automotive, for instance, car manufacturers are adding sensors to the vehicle, focus on what's happening inside the cabin so that they can detect, for example, if a driver is falling asleep or if somebody's extra tired while they're driving or distracted, right? Like texting while driving. We're able to detect these signs of fatigue, lack of attention, distraction, maybe even frustration or anger, right? Like sometimes, I'm on a conference call, I'm really animated, focused on the call. I'm not really focused on the driving, which is dangerous. So these car companies are adding this kind of technology and the personalizing the driving and the transportation experience to make it both safer, but also more enjoyable and more comfortable.
And that's just based on recognizing, is that just human behavior, facial expressions?
Yeah, we focus mostly on using computer vision, which is basically a camera sensor. So it can detect various facial expressions, hand gestures, which I do a lot of. But also things like vocal intonations, right? We all know that how fast you're speaking, how much energy is in your voice, how angry you are, all of that manifests through your voice as well. So that's another modality that we are interested in and we kind of invest in as well.
That's fascinating. You also, I think, have some case studies, and I know you previously mentioned healthcare, right? So I think there is you work with companies that work with kids or people with autism. Is there, do you see a huge future there too for the healthcare industry?
Yeah. So I'll go back in time a little bit. So when I joined MIT as a postdoc, I had no intention of starting a company at all. And at the time, actually, the project that brought me over to the US was a National Science Foundation grant to apply my technology, which is automated facial analysis and emotion understanding, to kids on the autism spectrum. Because kids on the spectrum really struggle with reading other people's nonverbal communication. And they find it really overwhelming. And so, they completely ignore all of that and don't even look at the person, right? And so they miss all of that information. So we piloted a Google Glass-like device, which didn't exist. This was in 2006. And you deployed it in a number of schools focused on autism, and the kids really improved. And that kind of, by doing this work, we started to get a lot of companies interested in the technology, and that provided the impetus for starting Affectiva. Now, fast forward 10 years, we are supporting a number of companies who are bringing this to market. So there's a company called Brain Power. They actually use Google Glass plus our technology, and they're helping hundreds of families with kids on the spectrum. There are folks who are looking at facial and vocal biomarkers of depression. Right? I mean, we are on our devices all the time. That's an opportunity to kind of learn your baseline. And then if you deviate from that baseline, it can flag that to a doctor, to a family member, and you could get kind of support. So there's a lot of applications in mental health. I find this exciting because when you walk into a doctor's office today, they don't ask you, Yekaterina, what is your blood pressure? They just measure it. But in mental health, the gold standard is still, from a scale from 1 to 10, how depressed are you? Or how suicidal are you? And it's so unfortunate. We need to bring data and technology to solving mental health issues.
This is fascinating. Interesting. So we have a question on LinkedIn from David Elliott. And David is asking, what is the most likely empathetic AI technology that will help transform online learning?
I love that use case. That's another application where I feel emotion AI can be really helpful. If you think of it, some of us have been really privileged to get access to amazing educators who, if you're sitting in a classroom, an awesome teacher would gauge the level of engagement of the students and personalize the class accordingly. So if you're tuning out, that he or she might call on you, might engage you. Now, online learning systems today are completely oblivious to the level of engagement of the student. So again, imagine if an online learning class or an online learning system, an online learning avatar can detect your level of engagement, level of confusion, level of frustration, and can re-engage you accordingly. It can kind of personalize the learning experience. I think this will allow for democratization of education. I grew up in the Middle East where not everybody's lucky to have an amazing education. And I think technology can really be part of the solution.
Yeah, you know what? I think about my daughter, right? And she's easily distracted, like any 10-year-old kid. So something that would engage her consistently, because nowadays the classrooms are so big, and there's just not enough teachers to really pay that personalized attention. So that's definitely, as a parent, that's definitely a struggle consistently to try to figure out how to keep them on track. We have another question from LinkedIn. So Terry Montgomery is asking, you mentioned that cars are using new technology right now. What car companies are currently doing sort of this, using the monitoring drivers to help them just kind of be more safe? Which companies would you mention here?
There's a lot of car manufacturers that are doing this already, actually not even using our technology, but using similar technologies. Mm-hmm. What we're focused on right now is the next generation of the vehicles, which are not going to only focus on the driver, but also the riders, the other passengers in the vehicle. You can imagine if you're a young family and you have your kids in the back seat, if they fall asleep, then maybe the lights dim and the music stops. Or if they're fighting in the back, in the back seat, and you're having to like turn around every so often, which is quite distracting, maybe the car can, recognize that and re-engage the kids in one way or another. So there's a lot of features that we're going to start rolling out that are focused not just on the driver, but the other passengers in the car. So it's coming.
It's very smart, and it'll definitely help parents for sure. Again, talking from personal experience. Let's switch a little bit. Let's talk about sort of your journey to success. In your new book, Girl Decoded, you talk about your transformation, sort of from being a nice Egyptian girl into a woman carving her own path as she revolutionizes technology. Can you share with us the catalyst that prompted this transformation, or maybe a specific story from your journey that really made the difference and put you on that path?
Yes, I grew up in the Middle East. I'm Egyptian, and I had the opportunity, kind of once I graduated from a computer science program in Cairo, to go to the UK to do my PhD. So it was a scholarship at Cambridge University. I had just graduated. I had also just gotten married, and I got this amazing scholarship. And at the time, with the support of my husband, who's now my ex, but he was very supportive, and he said, that's your dream. You should go. And so I left, and I went to Cambridge, and my family stayed back in Cairo. And when I got there, I realized I was spending more time with my device than I did with any other human being. And that made me realize two things. First, that this computer was completely oblivious to how I was feeling. And the second was that it was the main portal of communication with my family back home. And often days I was really homesick. I felt extremely lonely. And all I could communicate with my family were these little emojis or these little emoticons. And it just felt like all of the richness of human communication was just like disappeared in cyberspace. And so that just got me thinking, like, what if computers could become emotionally intelligent? Just like, I walk into a room and my mom's there and she's like, what's wrong, right? She knows me so well. Or I call her on the phone and just from hello, she's like, what happened? Tell me what happened. And I was like, I want to build a computer that's like that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But listen, embarking on a journey of this magnitude can be overwhelming, right, to many people. So how did you succeed where others have failed or may have failed? I mean, especially given that many barriers to success that you encountered along the way were probably, there's probably a number of those, right? So what actually, what advice can you give to others when it comes to taking that journey?
Yeah, a few, because I was definitely defying, the culture I grew up in by doing a lot of these things. I also don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, so starting a company was really foreign to them, and leaving my position at MIT to start a company, that was like, that was definitely not the norm. So I would say, first of all, having faith. I was envisioning this version of the universe that didn't exist yet, and there were a lot of unknowns. So as you step into the unknown, just have faith. I also would say I ran into a lot of obstacles. Some of the obstacles were technological and kind of, had to do with my research or my work, but a lot of it was also cultural, and a lot of naysayers, a lot of people who said, oh, you can't do it, this concept won't work, you'll never be able to raise money, you're a woman, like the list goes on. And at some point I just kind of recognized that these obstacles are opportunities. I'm actually reading a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and his thesis is that every time you face an obstacle, you have a choice. Either you get blocked by that obstacle and that's it, or you decide to just forge right through it and kind of advance right through it. And I think that's what I've been doing in my life. Like, I just kind of take a deep breath when I face these obstacles and just make a decision to figure it out.
But it's also, it seems to me, just based on what I know about you, is also passion drives you, right? You're very passionate about solving specific issues for the humankind. So that probably plays a big role as well.
Absolutely. One of our core values at the company is passionate, and I'm the executive sponsor of that. And in fact, I actually use it as a criteria when hiring people. If they're not passionate about what we're doing and what we stand for, I'm like, you're not a good fit, right? So passion is what gets you up day in, day out when it gets tough.
It's really hard to overcome those obstacles if you really don't care. So it makes perfect sense. Well, listen, let's switch to a serious topic, and that is, are there ethical implications associated with this new technology? And if so, are companies really prepared for them?
Yeah, that's a big one, and that's one that we care deeply about. So yes, like any technology in the world, there are good use cases and there's a lot of potential for abuse. And especially with this technology, because it's so personal, right? You're kind of quantifying people's emotional and cognitive states. There is a lot of potential for abuse. So we've taken a very strong stance on what these applications are. We talk about the ethical development and the ethical deployment of AI. So for example, we do not work in any industries where people cannot give their consent to being kind of recorded or monitored. We think it's really important that people want to share this data, which means that there are some industries, even though we can make a ton of money in these applications, we're just not going to go there, like security, lie detection, surveillance. These are areas that we just turn the business down. We continue to get interest from these organizations who are interested in that use case, and we just say, no, we're sorry, we do not work in these industries. But to me, it's not enough for us to just enforce these. We have to educate the ecosystem of other partners and other technology providers to take the same stance we do. So we organize an annual summit, the Emotion AI Summit, where we take a very strong stance. We invite people to participate in the conversation, and we're very active. Yeah, we're very active advocates of this idea of ethical development and deployment of AI.
Carrie on LinkedIn is asking, how is AI helping to protect ethical implications of monitoring mental health, for example, right? How do you think it might protect against discrimination?
Yeah, bias and discrimination are really big topics in AI in general and emotion AI in too, specifically. With bias, you may have already seen this in the news. There's a lot of backlash against technologies that do facial recognition, but these technologies are not accurate on specific minority groups like women of color, for example. So it may not work, on people who have darker skin colored or like me, who don't look like the typical like a typical white male human being, right? So the way to address these challenges is to really be very thoughtful about the data, what data is being used to train these algorithms. And I think, again, that's an area we're spending a lot of time on. The whole industry is trying to figure out, how do we really quantify and mitigate bias? We have some ideas and we share those publicly, but it's still a very nascent field, and we have to be absolutely careful around the unintended consequences of these technologies, because they're developing so fast, right? Like every few months, there's new techniques, new data, leaps of development and progress, and we have to kind of stop and think about the unintended consequences of these technologies.
Well, in your interview with EY, you said that social media will be reimagined and designed in a way that promotes empathy and humanizes our connections and communications. I mean, we're already seeing this with Instagram's use of artificial intelligence to detect things like bullying, right, and other types of harmful sort of content in comments or photos or even videos. So how close, though, will emotional AI how else will it help companies like that, right, especially in social media, actually change social media as it stands right now, right? Because there's a lot of issues, right, to discuss just around that.
Definitely. Yeah, so let's first break down how do people typically communicate. If you think about how people communicate ideas and you know, their mental states, only 7% of the signal is in the actual choice of words you're using. 93% is nonverbal. So on all these social media platforms, we're missing all of these nuances, you know, the facial expressions, the vocal intonations. And so I think and so as a result, when you're communicating online and you tweet, you know, a really mean message to somebody, you have no idea the effect it's had on them, right? Whereas I think if you were in person and you said something mean and you could see that you hurt the other person, then you can apologize, you can empathize. So I think there's an opportunity to reimagine what social media looks like by incorporating these nonverbal aspects from the get-go. My hypothesis is that would increase empathy and reduce polarization and all of the bullying we're seeing online.
Yeah, it's not as easy to say something to somebody else's face, right? Versus just typing it in and hitting send. So beyond ethical concerns, what are the obstacles to taking a human-centric approach to AI? Where do you see those?
So some of the obstacles I would say is just like, first of all, market readiness, right? So as I said, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And you know, society has shifted in its both kind of acceptance of technology, but also there's a little bit of techlash. We're starting to see that in the last couple of years. I love that, you know, there's now more involvement from the public in how we need to design and think about these technologies. Diversity is a big issue. If only a small subset of people are designing these AI systems that are supposed to work for everybody, they're not going to, right? Because you design for the things you know and the problems that you've experienced. So the more diverse people we have around the table to design these human-centric technologies, the better we will all be. So again, that's something that we really advocate for. And it's not just gender diversity. People often just go to gender or ethnic diverse, age diversity, right? Like, we are designing AI technologies that my kids who are 16 and 11 are going to use. Well, they need to be part of the conversation. So we have an internship program at Affectiva where we invite high school kids to intern over the summer because we believe that their perspective is really critical.
Right. That's a great approach, actually. Very well said. And I think if more people would do that, right, and give the power to younger voices, I think we'll all be better off. A lot of times internships are not focused on giving folks voice, right? More like, let's see what we can teach you versus the other way around. So the sort of reverse mentoring is, I think, critically important in those situations, right? So is your transformation complete, or do you expect it to sort of continue evolving similarly, like to the technology that you have pioneered?
So the technology transformation is not complete. We have a ton of work to do, and my personal transformation is definitely not complete. I have learned over the years to embrace my emotions and be vulnerable and kind of share those publicly. I also think I have this Debbie Downer voice in my head that always says, oh, you can't do that. There's no way you'll be able to pull that off. And it still exists. I've kind of worked on reframing it so that it's more supportive and positive, but every so often I'll hear it and it'll say, you're totally going to fail at this. So I'm a work in progress.
Well, aren't we all? Well, listen, I'm going to ask you a question that we like to ask every leader we interview. And that is, if there is one piece of advice you would share with the younger generations that aspires to follow in your footsteps, or even your peer leaders, right? Your peers, leaders who are launching the companies, running the companies, what would it be?
I go back to, like, you are going to run into a lot of naysayers who just don't believe in you, but all you need is a small group of supporters who believe in you, who believe in your mission. They don't have to, what I love about being a YPO is that I get challenged, right? Like, they're like-minded people. We share the same set of core values. And so I feel like it's a generally supportive community, but they will also challenge me. And that's the type of people you want to support yourself with. And I think that's been really, really critical.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and it's fantastic advice. Well, Rana, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today, and honestly, thank you personally for the inspiration. I admire what you're doing, and just continue to watch it with awe. To those of you who were listening, thank you for joining us today. This is YPO Presents. Until we meet next time.